Alright, we're going to start with the things that we are going to utilize. So we're going to use this Arduino Uno. So we should be pretty familiar with that, hopefully. This is a mechanical relay, and you'll see on this end here it says DC plus, DC minus, and in. Okay, so we also have in use this little guy here. This is a soil moisture sensor. We have a pump. This is quite a small pump, but it's reasonably good at its job. So it uses between 6 and 20 volts, and we're going to run it at around about 12 volts, and it moves a decent amount of water. So you can get miniature pumps which will run just off the power supplied by a normal a power source that will run through the Arduino, but to get a more kind of steady stream of water, a bigger stream of water, we need to run a parallel power circuit, and so we're going to use the mechanical relay to do that. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. These are the things that we're going to use. There's one additional thing that we're going to use, and that is a variable power supply. So we have to power this somehow. We have to power our pump, and we're going to do that with a variable on-desk power supply, which allows me to change what voltage I'd like to supply. And we're going to do around about 10 to 12 volts. All right, so we're going to set up the relay. So we're going to connect the Arduino to the relay so it can control it, tell it what to do. So first things first, we want to put some power going from the Arduino. The Arduino is going to power the relay. So let's put 5 volts through to the relay. So we want to go to the one that says DC plus, and we're going to tie that off. Okay. Now we want DC minus, which is the ground. Down there. And so when I screw these screws down, they should be pretty firmly in there. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I've got that going to power, instead of going directly to ground, I'm going to go into a ground rail instead. I'm going to take that ground rail. I'm going to take it back to ground. There we go. And that will allow me to plug anything that needs to go into ground, and there are a few things that need to go to ground. I can just plug them into that rail and they'll get put through to ground, and I won't have to, because there's I think there's 3 ground pins on the Arduino itself, but we'll just run to the rail and then run back to 1 ground pin. It makes things a little bit simpler. Alright, so we've got our power going in, our power going out, so the circuit is kind of happening. Now what we're going to do is we need to get the data from the Arduino Uno, so the kind of on-off switch, the one that kind of goes, okay, you should be opening and you should be closing, because that's essentially what this relay is. It's kind of a gate, it's a switch, opens and closes quite quickly, and the Arduino is the one that controls that. So what we do is we're going to run the Arduino control on digital pin 3. So pin number 0, 1, 2, 3, digital pin 3, and you'll see an in section here. Gets a bit fiddly. boom, boom. So that goes in like that. Okay, so that's data in. Alright, so we've got power, we've got our ground, and we've got our data coming from the Arduino. And that's all done. So next up we're going to connect, as I mentioned, we've got a few things going to ground. I'm going to connect those up. So I have the pump, which needs to go to ground. And I have the variable power supply, which also has something that needs to go to ground. So, first of all, let me get these wires sorted. Okay, so I have the pump. Okay, and I'm going to attach that to there it goes. I'm going to attach that to a female wire. I just need to make sure that I've got the right thing there. Boom. So brown is positive, blue is negative. There we go. Blue is negative, so I'm going to get the negative. I'm going to slot that into the female part of my wire, and then I'm going to take that wire to my new ground rail. Alright, I've also got the negative, the ground wire of my variable power supply that needs to go to ground too. So I'm going to plug that in. Okay. And I have one more ground to figure out, and that is for my soil moisture sensor. Okay, so again, if we've done a decent job, we should hopefully have got a black wire. There we go. And so that's why I've got a power rail. Okay, so it makes things a little bit simpler. You can see I've got a few things going back to ground. So now what we're going to do is we're going to connect up the rest of the soil moisture. So on the soil moisture sensor, you'll see it's got a ground. It's got, let me point that out. So ground, and it's got a little label, GND. That's going the black wire. VCC to the red wire, and AUOT to the yellow wire. So power positive is the VCC, power negative is the GND, and the data cable is the yellow one. Okay, so I'm going to plug the yellow cable into my Arduino. Now, this works a little bit different to maybe what you're used to, because we're used to working on the digital pins, but in this case, this is an analog sensor. So it's going to give us an analog signal, and so we need to use the analog in pins, which are over here on the Arduino. So plug the yellow one into analog in. Now we just need to plug the power for the sensor, and it's going to get the 3.3 volts. So we've now got power, ground, and data. So the capacitive soil sensor is set up. Okay, so now we're going to finish setting up our remaining components. So the pump. This is the one that the Arduino sends a signal to the relay, and it's like, I want you to switch that pump on. It's not directly involved in terms of the power supply. Power supply bypasses the Arduino, goes through the relay to the pump. So what we need to do is we need to get that pump connected to the relay. So I've got a male to female lead. So I've got male on one end, female on the other. There it goes. And I'm going to slot the wire in there. Now this, where do you think this is going to connect? So we need to connect it to the relay. Now there's a few different options on the relay. We've got NO, COM, and NC. Now because we don't want the pump to be on by default, we're going to go to never closed. Slot that in there. Tighten that screw up. Now we need to get some major power coming into that relay. So the big power goes into the relay via the COM port, or the COM, whatever it's called. COM port's probably not the best name for it because we confuse it with COM ports on computers. So it plugs into the COM slot. There we go. So now we have major power coming in, so the 12 volt power coming in on this wire here. And we have the power for the pump from this wire here connected to the relay. So this relay connects back to the Arduino via this data cable here. Can just turn that off and on, and you'll hear when it goes, it clicks, kind of like that noise there. It clicks, and that's the gate opening and closing, turning it off and on. So the Arduino just opens the gate and closes the gate, and the rush of power rushes through the relay and not through the Arduino. The Arduino can't handle that much voltage, and it would fry the board. So we run it through a relay, and the Arduino just controls the relay, and that's how it works. All right, so we are all set up and pretty much ready to go. We just need to do the code, and we'll be away. Okay, so here's my code. I'm just going to run you through it so we know what's going on. So here we have a series of variables. Now variables are useful because it means that we can change the value of things, and it changes all through our program. So you can see here motor pins used here, but it might also be used down here and down here as well. So if I wanted to update the motor pin, I could just update it here. I could change that value to something else. I could change it to like 5. Okay, now that would change it all through my program, and it's useful to use variables for that reason. So we've got motor pin, blink pin, water time, and wait time. So further down we've got our setup loop, our setup function, not a loop. So this runs once at the start of the program. It's the first thing that is run. So we set up the variables and then it runs this. So pin mode of the motor pin is set to an output. Yeah, so that's pin 3. So that's the pump pin. So the one that turns the relay on to tell the pump to go. And then we've got pin 13, which is the onboard LED to tell it to blink. That's, you know, not a major requirement, but can be useful as a signal that things are working. And we've got our serial begin at 9600 board. Okay, and why that's useful is because we've got this thing up here called a serial monitor, and it's going to output the value of our soil moisture sensor. And we need to get that going. We need to start that, and that's what this line of code does. It starts the serial service so we can monitor the analog value of that sensor. All right, now we get into the loop. This is the one that runs again and again and again. So the rest of the program just runs this loop again, 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 until it's unplugged or stopped or runs out of power or something like that. It just runs it infinitely. So it's got a moisture pin variable. So you can see I've declared a new variable, kind of like I did up here, but I've declared it down here. So it's only visible in this loop. So int moisture pin equals analog read A0. Okay, so it's reading the the soil moisture sensor, it's reading a value, an analog value, and storing it in this variable moisture pin. We've then got in moisture, and there is essentially a little bit of maths that converts that analog value, which I think is between 0 and 123, and converts it to a percentage of that total. So we're easier to deal with percentages than kind of raw numbers. It then prints to the serial monitor, moisture level is, and then it prints the moisture level, okay, which is that variable there. So we get a reading in from the soil moisture sensor, and we print it out to the serial monitor. So when you open up serial monitor, it should be there. And we'll see that in just a second. Okay, now we do some decisions. We want to, based on what that soil moisture is like, so if it's really high, it's been really wet, it's just rained, we don't want to be watering. So if it's less than 50, we are going to turn on the motor and we're going to blink the LED to say, hey, we're watering. If it's, and then it delays the water time. So that is basically how long you want it to water for. So you've got water time times 1,000, and 1,000 takes it from milliseconds up to seconds. Okay, so it's going to wait 1 times 1,000, which is 1 second. Okay, and then it's going to retest that moisture. Now, if the moisture is greater than 50, so this is not true, it switches to this case here, which is the else case. So it writes to the motor pin to turn it to high, which turns off the motor, and it blinks the pin at low, so it turns off the LED. Serial print line, moisture level is above the threshold, waiting 15 seconds, and then you've got 1 times 15,000, and that should be 15,000 in the comments. Boom, boom, boom. And that waits for 15 seconds. So it waits 15 seconds to test the soil again. Now that's quite quick, so I don't expect it to have evaporated enough. But for our testing purposes, that suits us, because 15 seconds is not too long to wait, but it allows us to do things like change where the soil moisture sensor is, and then get another reading pretty promptly. Okay, so that's the code, and hopefully that's understood. Now, the things in grey, I should just mention, comments. And you will have to insert comments to make sure that you demonstrate knowledge of how the code works. Okay, so if you don't know how anything works, you need to ask the question, you need to ask me, but that's what those comments are for. Okay, to demonstrate that knowledge, and for the person who's reading your code, you go, oh yeah, that's what that code does. But it also shows me that, yeah, you know what that code does. Okay. So what we're going to do, take this guy out and dry him off. So you can see already it's gone down to 59. Threshold has not yet been reached, but it should eventually get reached, and bam, there it goes. And it's ticked in, and you can see that water level going up. It goes up pretty fast, the pump's pretty good, and you'll notice that you might have heard that click. That's the relay. It's a mechanical relay. I've just popped that back into the water, and there you hear another click. So the threshold is no longer being reached because I just popped that back in the water, and you can see the relay is now switched off. So it's no longer pumping, and if we take that out, give that a bit of a dry. Boom, boom, boom. We should see that reach the proper threshold. Let's get on them, and we should hear that click, bang, and there it's watering again. Okay, because the soil moisture is now registering that it's dry. Okay, I'll pop that back in. Boom, 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 because it's getting pretty full over there. So, boom, there it goes. It's turned off because again, soil moisture is now registering that it's nice and wet. It's been watered, well watered. All right, so that's what we're looking for. I'm going to break this down in a kind of slightly more organized way, but that's the overview.